last night?
He always reminded me of my dad, and I love my dad and James Stewart. They were the same person.
Carol Burnett built one of the biggest shows in television history. She won 25 Emmys and made millions laugh every week. But on October 27, 1973, something happened backstage that nobody saw coming. Her partner of 7 seasons slammed a door so hard, the props rattled down the hallway. Minutes later, she fired him on the spot. The crew had been placing bets on when it would happen. And the wildest part? This was not even the worst betrayal she faced in Hollywood. Today, we are uncovering the people Carol Burnett refused to work with ever again. Carol Burnett came into the world on April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas, at a time when almost everyone was struggling. The Great Depression was swallowing families whole, and hers was no different. Her parents, Joseph and Ina Louise, tried to keep things together. He worked at a gas station. She wrote publicity pieces for movie studios. Still, money slipped away faster than they could earn it. They ended up in a single room without indoor plumbing, living off welfare and whatever help neighbors or the government offered. Even hand-me-down clothes or a single chicken felt like a blessing. Carol noticed the poverty around her too, yet she never felt alone in it, because every house on the block looked the same. Then her grandmother Mabel stepped in to help, and those early years quietly taught her how to survive things that felt too heavy for a child. Everything shifted again when Carol turned 7. Her father's drinking got worse. Her parents split, and her mother put her on a train to Hollywood so she could live with Nanny, as Carol called her grandmother. The new apartment was tiny, barely enough for a growing girl and her cousin, who slept on a pull-out couch. Hollywood looked shiny from the outside, but inside their home, things were tense. Her father's alcoholism kept dragging him down. Her mother's struggles followed not far behind. Carol saw adults crack under pressure. She saw addiction up close. She learned early that humor could soften fear, and that laughter sometimes came from the darkest places. Then came one of the hardest blows. On October 29, 1943, her father died from alcohol-related heart failure. She was only 10 when the news arrived in a cold telegram at school. The shock hit her like a wave she was too young to swim through. There wasn't anyone who really knew how to talk to a child about loss, so she had to tuck that grief into her heart and move forward. She figured out that even deep pain could turn into stories that helped people feel less alone. One day, she would share that gift with millions. School became a doorway to something brighter. At Hollywood High, she discovered that she could make people laugh with a single look or a perfect imitation. Her impression of Ingrid Bergman got big reactions, and each laugh pulled her closer to the stage. UCLA accepted her with a journalism scholarship, but the theater called to her even louder. Performing cost money she didn't have, yet she worked odd jobs and kept her eyes on dreams that refused to shrink. Her classmates saw something in her that she was only beginning to recognize in herself. Love pulled her in a new direction. In 1954, she left UCLA during her junior year and drove with her boyfriend, Don Soroyan, across the country in a 1949 Ford that held more hope than cash. They reached New York City with just $100. They could not afford a room at the rehearsal club, so they slept outside in the car, staring up at a city that felt like it was testing them before giving them anything. But Carol was stubborn. The city would have to move before she did. She soon found a place inside the rehearsal club and worked as a hat check girl, hoping every night that someone in the crowd would look past the hat rack and see her talent. She earned $1.50 in tips. But in March 1955, everything changed. The girls at the club put on a review and invited agents and stars. Carol stepped on stage, and her voice and humor reached the right people. Agents noticed. Doors cracked open. Soon, she saw her name on call sheets for variety shows. Just like that, the shy girl from San Antonio was on her way. The climb continued. In 1956, her roommate told her about auditions for a musical called Once Upon a Mattress. She went, she sang, she made them laugh, and suddenly, she was Princess Winifred. By November 25, 1959, the show opened on Broadway, and audiences fell in love with the fearless girl who would splash around a moat filled with water while wearing bloomers. She earned a Tony nomination, yet she turned down a movie version so she wouldn't be trapped in one role forever. She wanted a wide horizon, not a narrow box. Opportunity called again when Gary Moore saw her nightclub act in 1960. He put her on his show. The country watched her silliness every week, and in 1962, she won her first Emmy for Outstanding Performance in Variety. That win wasn't just a trophy. It told everyone that she belonged in the spotlight. And then came the moment that made her unforgettable. In February 1962, she sang "I Made a Fool of Myself" over John Foster Dulles on national television. It was silly, it was smart, it was perfectly her. The audience erupted. CBS took notice. They signed her, protected her, and soon she negotiated a daring 10-year contract that paved the way for her own show. She reached a level of creative power few women had ever touched in Hollywood. Through all of this success, she still carried family at the center of her life. She married producer Joe Hamilton on May 6, 1963, after he helped transform her nightclub act into something bigger. They had 3 daughters. Carrie came first in December 1963, then Jody in January 1967. Erin arrived in August 1968. They laughed together. They struggled together. They grieved together. Fame didn't protect them from real pain. Carrie, brilliant and bold, would lose her life to cancer at only 38. Erin would battle addiction. Yet Carol loved her children with a strength that fame could never shake. While the world watched her smile, she was building one of television's most beloved shows. In 1967, she pitched CBS a weekly variety show and insisted on doing it her way. She brought in Harvey Corman after pushing him through 12 auditions. She brought in Lyle Waggoner. She spotted Vicki Lawrence after seeing her as a contestant in a local contest. The cast clicked. The Carol Burnett show premiered on September 11, 1967. It beat out Westerns. It reached 30 million viewers a week. It introduced her famous ear tug, a little message of love to her grandmother watching at home. The audience felt like family. The laughs kept coming. In October 1967, she shocked everyone by walking down a staircase in a dress made from real curtains, rod still attached. The Went with the Wind spoof became legendary. The curtain dress now hangs in the Smithsonian, a reminder that a perfect joke can last longer than most serious art. When Tim Conway joined as a writer in 1972, he created a dentist sketch so funny that Harvey Corman lost control on live television because he laughed too hard. The show won 25 Emmy Awards over the years. Hollywood respected her. Fans adored her. She even fought off network pressure when sponsors threatened to pull $5 million in ads because they thought a curtain rod joke crossed a line. She protected her cast too, paying salaries from her own pocket during disputes. Loyalty pulsed through every decision she made. Even the characters who seemed small at first grew into giants. Vicki Lawrence's mama became a sensation and eventually carried her own sitcom. The show wasn't just entertainment, it was a factory of legends. But fame never shielded Carol from heartbreak. Rumors tore at her marriage. In 1974, Joe confessed to an affair with the show's set designer. Their relationship fractured. A year later, her daughter Carrie was diagnosed with leukemia. Carol paused everything for her. Love held her steady, but the pain was deep. Then came another shock. Joe had signed away control of the show without telling her. She filed for divorce in 1976. The financial loss was huge, the emotional toll even bigger. Yet she stayed firm, protected her daughters, and held on to the show that carried her name. When the divorce was finalized in 1984, she walked forward with dignity and the same quiet grit she learned as a child. She built a new life with drummer Brian Miller. Married March 3, 1977, he helped bring peace to the chaos. In 1980, she sold her La Jolla home for $2.8 million to escape paparazzi, who would not leave her family in peace as they dealt with Carrie's health scares. She learned again that safety mattered more than luxury. Her courage showed itself in other ways, too. In 1979, she starred in Friendly Fire, and the emotional truth of that story pushed her to testify before Congress when the Pentagon tried to block the film. She fought for it to be seen. She won. The broadcast reached 64 million people. The awards poured in, and she proved she could break hearts just as easily as she could make them heal through laughter. At the end of the 1960s, Carol Burnett stood at the center of a show that quietly turned into a machine. The Carol Burnett Show ran for 11 seasons, from 1967 until its final episode on March 29, 1978. In those 279 episodes, she built a world where sketch comedy, music, and pathos lived side by side, and that world kept earning long after the cameras stopped. Syndication rights for the show have generated well over $100 million in lifetime earnings, with reruns and edited compilations still sold, streamed, and broadcast around the world. Even decades later, in 2018, CBS picked up digital multicast rights for all 11 seasons, making sure her variety hour kept reaching new eyes, who were not even born when it first aired. The industry counted 25 Emmy Awards for the series, but the real weight sat in its influence. Writers and performers who built later sketch shows grew up watching Carol crack herself up, hold a room, and then slip into a serious song without losing anyone. Inside that success, there were choices that showed how she thought about people. Jim Nabors was one of them. She loved his presence so much that she made him the first guest of every season. He appeared about 50 times, a number that put him near the top of any guest list in television history. She insisted he be paid $5,000 per appearance, and when the show's budget did not stretch, she sometimes covered him from her own pocket. She did that because she trusted his chemistry with her and because she believed loyalty mattered more than a line on a spreadsheet. That loyalty, however, did not always flow back to her from others. As Carol's star rose, Hollywood's older guard watched. Some loved her, some only tolerated her. At one high-profile event at the Beverly Hilton in the late 1960s, Cary Grant stood among studio people and industry royalty and spoke to her in a way she never forgot. He dismissed variety television as lowbrow and told her, in front of others, that punchlines were not art. For a woman who had just changed what TV comedy could look like, the words cut deep. She stayed polite, but a wall went up. She refused to work with him on any future project. They remained cool and distant until his death in 1986. That moment became a quiet example of an old divide inside the business. Film stars on one side and television comics on the other, all pretending to clap for one another at award shows while drawing lines in private. If Cary Grant represented a public insult, Marlon Brando showed a different kind of damage. During work around the 1976 television project Annie, Brando called her at 3 in the morning. He started with praise, telling her how talented she was. Then the tone shifted. Over the next half hour, the call turned explicit and graphic. She tried to keep it light, then realized she had to shut it down. She finally ended the call, embarrassed and upset, only to wake up to gossip the next day. People whispered that the call had lasted more than an hour and twisted details for sport. She cut him out of her life from that point on. When he turned up at the 1974 AFI event and other ceremonies, her team kept them apart. Decades later, in a 2025 interview, she named him among 5 people in Hollywood who had hurt her the most, along with an unnamed CBS executive who allegedly blackballed her after her divorce and cost her 2 film roles. The memory of that early morning phone call still sat there, proof of how easily power could cross boundaries in private, then pretend nothing happened in public. On camera, the show looked joyous. Behind the scenes, the people who made it work carried their own storms. Harvey Corman was the biggest example. For years, he and Carol created magic together. He broke in the middle of sketches, laughed until he shook, and helped make even simple bits feel alive. Then, around the early 1970s, something shifted. His mood turned unpredictable. At one rehearsal in October 1973, guest star Petula Clark offered a small suggestion for her sketch. Corman snapped and told her to stay in her lane. The room went quiet. Clark almost walked off the set. It was not a single bad day. Crew members had already noticed that he was growing colder with Tim Conway, refusing to play along with ad-libs that usually sent everyone into fits of laughter. Carol started flubbing her own lines because she was trying to manage his moods as much as the material in front of her. Off stage, his life was also in free fall. Harvey's marriage to Donna L. Hart ended in 1977 after 17 years and 4 children. That divorce fed his volatility. By the middle of season 7, he marched into negotiations demanding a raise of $15,000 per episode, more than anyone else on the cast. He wanted a salary that matched Tim Conway's, who was already among the highest-paid comedians on television. The demand landed on a show already juggling tight budgets. Carol and the producers worried about money, but they worried even more about the mood on stage. Harvey's outbursts grew louder. Crew members whispered about his unpredictable behavior and watched for the next eruption. Those eruptions did not take long to appear. In one rehearsal, he mocked Lyle Waggoner's bodybuilding poses in front of the staff until Waggoner visibly bristled. In November 1972, Vicki Lawrence remembered him exploding at the wardrobe department because his pants were too tight. He shouted, "People froze," and what should have been a routine fitting turned into a scene. Crew members started using words like impossible when they talked about him. The atmosphere grew heavy. Carol, who loved mischief and warmth, found herself walking into a workplace that now felt like a minefield. She tried quiet warnings. She pulled him aside, told him she needed him to bring his best, reminded him that this was her name on the title card and her responsibility if things fell apart. He did not listen. On October 20th, 1973, he skipped 2 script rewrites, then arrived at rehearsal clearly hungover. Stage manager Logs even noted the smell of liquor on him. His timing slipped. His energy sagged. The crew watched in disbelief. Afterward, some of them started placing $50 bets on how long it would take before he walked out for good. Carol went home and poured her frustration into her journal. She wrote that she felt she was losing control of her own show. The breaking point came a week later. On October 27, 1973, after another tense rehearsal, she walked down the hall to Harvey's dressing room. She wanted to check his mood, maybe cool things down. When she stepped in, he snapped at her, telling her it was none of her business, then slammed the door so hard that props rattled down the corridor, and people heard it from several rooms away. It was not only rude, it was public. It showed everyone how little respect he had left for her authority. Within minutes, Carol called his agent at William Morris and said Harvey was no longer on the show after that night's taping. When she returned to his dressing room, she told him plainly that his behavior was wrecking her performance and poisoning the production. After 7 seasons, her partner was out. The crew felt the shock, but some admitted they were relieved. They had seen this coming. Still, Carol did not want the story to end in bitterness if she could help it. Over the weekend, she thought about what to do. She decided that if Harvey returned, he needed to prove he understood the problem and could change the energy he brought. She told him he was free to go, but that if he came back, he had to be cheerful, or he would be gone for good. To drive the point home, she had a plaque placed in the hallway that read, "Skip, whistle down the hall Monday." It was a simple demand with a clear message. On Monday, October 29th, Harvey showed up and did exactly that. He literally skipped down the hall, whistling Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky as the crew watched. They burst into laughter. The tension broke. Carol welcomed him back, and the show moved forward. Later, at the CBS bar, he stood on top of the counter and shouted, "She fired me." He told the story with a strange mix of pride and humility, admitting that he respected her backbone. In 1974, he won an Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actor, a moment that proved their professional chemistry had survived the crisis, and, in some ways, grown stronger because of it. Years later, at his memorial, people would say that being fired had actually been good for their partnership, giving them new respect for each other when they reunited for specials. Corman's career away from Carol rarely reached that same peak. After leaving the show in 1977, he tried to build his own vehicle. The Harvey Corman show launched that same year, but ratings collapsed almost immediately. CBS canceled it after only 5 episodes. Harvey later called it the biggest mistake of his career. He blamed typecasting, saying audiences only accepted him alongside Carol and could not see him as a standalone star. Carol never gloated. She stayed his friend until his death on May 29, 2008, at age 81. At his memorial, where she spoke, people mentioned that he held 15 Emmy Awards and a long career. But the line that stuck was the one that framed his firing from her show as a turning point that deepened their bond rather than ending it. The fallout from conflict was not limited to co-stars. Carol's personal life carried its own shock. In 1982, she discovered that her husband, Joe Hamilton, who also produced her show, had quietly formed Hamilton Productions. Through that company, he had registered spin-offs and related properties such as Mama's Family under his own name without telling her. Court documents later showed that he had set up layers of companies to claim ownership of material that grew directly out of her work, including valuable syndication rights. During their 1984 divorce, more details surfaced. Hidden assets, unfaithfulness, and cold calculations replaced any picture of a single united partnership. When she confronted him in their CBS offices, he reportedly told her that business decisions had nothing to do with emotion. For her, it felt like a double betrayal, both as a wife and as the creative force behind the brand he was packaging. The legal fight over that betrayal dragged on for nearly a year. Outlets like People and Variety covered each move in court. In the end, the judge awarded her the show's name and 60% of the syndication profits. On paper, it looked like a victory. In private, it left scars. She had built a show that made others rich. Now she knew some of those profits had been diverted behind her back by someone she trusted most. Even in the middle of these storms, Carol used her power to push for fairness where she could. In 1974, Vicki Lawrence looked at the paychecks and saw a gap she could no longer ignore. Lyle Waggoner was making $8,000 per episode, while she earned far less. She went to Carol for support. Instead of backing away from conflict, Carol stood beside her. Together, they pushed CBS to raise Vicki's salary to $6,500 per episode. It was still less than Lyle, but it closed the distance and set a quiet example. In a time when women in television were often grateful just to be there, Carol helped a younger female co-star ask for more. The outside world continued to change too, and Carol's name kept appearing in surprising places. She had voiced Horton in the 1970 animated special Horton Hears a Who, which many viewers loved for its message about caring for the smallest and most vulnerable. Decades later, in 2021, 6 Dr. Seuss books were pulled from publication because of racist imagery, including wartime cartoons that resurfaced and shocked readers. The contrast was hard to miss. Carol had given her voice to a story that felt inclusive and gentle, while the creator behind it was being re-examined for harmful images. The debate over how to separate art from its artist rolled through the culture, and her earlier work suddenly had a new frame around it. Her own legacy did not stand still. In 2005, the White House placed the Presidential Medal of Freedom around her neck, calling out her extraordinary contributions to American entertainment. In 2013, she received the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, joining a list that included names like Richard Pryor and Bill Cosby, a reminder of how complicated and evolving the idea of a comedy legend can be. Her show, which had ended in 1978, still pulled in millions of views each month through reruns and clips. In early 2025, her official YouTube channel began streaming episodes non-stop and hit 700 million cumulative views in just 3 months. Younger viewers discovered her through phones and laptops rather than Saturday night television, yet they laughed at the same sketches. At 92, she earned a Primetime Emmy nomination in 2024 for her work in Palm Royale, making her the oldest woman nominated in a comedy acting category. Even seasoned industry people were startled by that statistic. It meant that she was still part of the current conversation, not just a nostalgic reference. Behind the awards and numbers, her private story carried its own weight. A case of mumps in the 1950s left her infertile, something she rarely spoke about in public. She adopted 3 children and poured herself into both her family and her career. By 1991, estimates put her estate at around $75 million. By 2025, that figure had grown to roughly $500 million, driven by residuals from her series, licensing deals, book sales, and ongoing syndication. Her autobiography, One More Time, along with other memoirs, stayed in print and sold steadily, feeding both her bank accounts and her influence. Classic sketches kept being licensed for commercials, new shows, and streaming packages, turning old bits of physical comedy into fresh revenue. The business and the pain did not end as she aged. In 2025, she turned down a cameo in a proposed Blazing Saddles sequel, something many fans had assumed she would join because of her history with Mel Brooks and with Harvey Corman, who had a famous role in the original film. She declined, saying she feared old tensions would rise again, a reference to the friction with Corman during the later years of her show. At CBS, his name still hung on the door of his old dressing room, a plaque that served as both tribute and reminder. It symbolized the layered partnership they had shared, full of brilliance, anger, firing, forgiveness, and finally, affection. Through all of this, Carol kept telling her own story in small pieces. In a 2016 memoir, she described a wild moment during a 1982 photo shoot with President Ronald Reagan. In a crowded room, with a magazine crew on hand, she decided to prank them by mooning the staff. The magazine refused to publish the shot, worried about backlash from Reagan's team and from conservative readers. Later, she admitted that she might have taken the joke too far. The unpublished photo became part of her lore, proof that she could still misjudge a line in the same way she tested boundaries on stage. Along the way, she kept track of the people who had hurt her. In that 2025 conversation, where she named 5 figures who had wronged her, she mentioned Marlon Brando's late-night call, Cary Grant's cutting remark about her art, and an unnamed executive who froze her out of film work after her divorce. She also hinted at years of quiet sabotage and public humiliation that most viewers never saw. Yet the same woman who carried those memories also stepped to a podium in 2008 to deliver Harvey Corman's eulogy. She told the room his timing was irreplaceable, that even the break between them had somehow fed their later work. She acknowledged that the time he was fired from her show, which once felt like a disaster, had eventually turned into something that strengthened their respect when they returned to the stage together.